let's move into probably the more, we've done China since your background is there, and we've gone to COVID, and now we're in this new time that sort of all of a sudden COVID was turned off when Mr. Floyd was killed by the cop. And I'm thinking, when I saw that video, you know, people talk about it being brutal, and I was struck by the lack of brutality because there was absolutely no humanity in it whatsoever. It reminded me, Denver, of when I was in Dachau, outside of Munich, because people said, "What was it like? Did you just feel the brutality?" I said, "No, I felt the lack of humanity." And then even I looked, the guy taking the camera, I'm like, "You could have said something," and the cops didn't do anything. And I think we've gotten to this point of dehumanization where it didn't even register that this man was dying. And that's what your job is. And I was outraged by the lack of humanity in this and the lack of brutality. It was like, you don't matter. It didn't matter. And I was just struck by that. What's your impression of that?
When you dehumanize an individual, whether it's in any situation, it's one of the most horrifying things to watch. And the person behind the camera you mentioned, Chris, I didn't think anybody else would mention that. I did actually to my family. I said, did the person behind the camera realize what they were taping? Or did they think that, were they scared of law enforcement? Did they not say, hey, I think you're killing that individual, right? Maybe you should take, I guess that has been the thing that I have laid awake. Like if it was me behind the camera, knowing what I know now, obviously I would have been, well, I'm a congressman now, right? And I've been in military and I've been trained. I'd be like, what are you doing, right? You're killing that individual. Right. Right? But does that mean that law enforcement, you know, turns on you? Or I don't know what they were afraid of at that point, because I think that's something as a human being that you have to step into. I saw this dehumanizing behavior, and I'm not going to get emotional, but it was rough. I was in Romania on the Serbian border with the Roma. I was doing some work in some very dark areas. When I say dark, there was no power on in some of these cities. After 10 p.m., they were turned off during the Balkans War during that time in the late 90s. And I saw a lady walking down the street with a naked baby holding by her ankle and screaming. And I was with Romanian intelligence, and we were sitting behind this area, and very, very late at night, and there's barely these lights casting down on her. So I'm like, I'm going down there. I was restrained by Romanian intelligence and some other American intelligence assets. I'm like, I'm going to help this individual. Like, no, it's a trap. And by the way, she's just a gypsy. Who cares? I think when you're in those situations and you see these things firsthand, you recognize just the diabolical nature of that situation. And when you recognize that, it should hurt everybody right here in the heart, you know, and it should make people think that maybe we have some things we need to fix.
Well, let's talk about fixing those things, because there's a lot of emotion around this right now, and there should be, because it's an emotional thing. We've seen this go on in our country far too long. People are afraid to talk about real solutions. What can Congress do, or what can the federal government do, or should it do to fix the areas of racism in our society, our inequalities, our inequities?
I think the first thing you do is you do an absolute, and I know you do an intelligence study on the facts, figures, and statistics of what's happening in these communities based on law enforcement. I think that's the first thing you do. Instead of making it emotional, hyperbolic, let's look at facts. Those facts bear out those issues, and we take steps to make sure we cure that through training. And I really appreciated what you talked about on reconciliation, Chris. There has to come a time where we come together with facts and figures and say, this type of behavior has to stop, and here's the other areas that we need to look at. But it has to be based on facts and not emotion. And I think that's the thing that bothers me about this is I want to know what the facts are of this. So I'm going to do my own study and look at this. And what are we looking at with unarmed individuals being killed, right? In the Black community, the white community, people of color community, and that's Hispanics too, right? I don't think this is an issue for all of us as Americans to break down, right? And make sure that we have a real answer on this. And then how about this? How about instead of emotion, right? We look at facts, and instead of, rhetoric, we look at solutions. And I think if we can replace that facts and solutions and look at this as a problem with that fact set, I think we can go forward and do some amazing things as Americans. And, you know, I've watched these protests and the peaceful protesters, my heart goes out to them. But those who have weaponized this, whether there's looters or criminal elements or political elements who've really fallen into the line of domestic terrorism, we have to stop that too. So what do we do here? We have a command and control element that worries me when it comes to politicizing this and weaponizing it, but we have peaceful protesters we must protect. And that is something that is a very, very fine line on identifying, determining who those individuals are. This has been one of the most disturbing things that I've witnessed. And listen, I've been through the longest shutdown, impeachment, the Mueller report, Soleimani, al-Baghdadi, the pandemic, and now this in my first 17 months as a freshman congressman. And this one bothers me, and it should bother everybody. And we really should look at this in a factual manner, in a statistically based manner to see where the problems are, how endemic they are to our society, and at that point start coming up with solutions rather than screaming and yelling and maybe hurting other people and using this as an excuse too.
In my estimation, there needs to be an ongoing panel of leaders who objectively look at what's going on in our country and offer real solutions, rather than having this thing be taken away by the latest news events. And that's,
yes.
That's the danger in all this, is that we're going to lose sight of this. And it's like, oh yeah, remember that happened back in such and such time. I think this is a real tipping point moment in American culture, that we have to go and deconstruct not just what happens. That, like, what this guy had like 18 complaints filed against him. Where was the management structure breakdown in that police department? Because not every police department is like this, and you know, some of them are quite good and do a very credible job and a very dangerous job. And I think we have to look at this not in this. We have to look at it, you know, at a macro level, but also at a micro level, and show real progress to the American people, and have, I don't care if it's weekly or every other week, reports come out. This is what's happening. This is what we're doing. Because you can't just go, we're mad. We're mad as hell. We're going to throw stuff through a window, steal stuff, and everyone go, oh, we're really concerned about this, and you know, I'm upset about it too. And then we go about our daily business. We can't do that this time. We have to engage. And you know, the flip side of that too is we have to engage on violence, not only from law enforcement towards citizens, but citizens towards law enforcement. And you got to, man, listen, I did counterterrorism, but I also touched on counter narcotics analysis. Dear friends with state troopers, federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, and 99.99% of law enforcement are people that, I mean, listen, I'd go to war with, right? I trust them with my life. But those bad apples, we have to identify quickly. And I think that's going to take, in some instances, in some departments, again, not all, it's going to take a culture shift. Where if you see that type of evil, you've got to report it, even if it even goes against you. And I got to tell you, you know, I felt like the Serpico of Virginia politics sometimes, but we certainly need people that are not afraid to say the right thing and do the right thing regardless of the outcome. And I know that's tough, but being an American means you do tough things. I almost said you do tough things, not you do what you got to do, and that means you got to have a spine. And I think we're just in a new